Okay, so we are on to the third topic for this chapter, and this time we will be discussing about the geologic time scale. So again, the big idea is that Earth underwent evolutionary processes that can be described in terms of geologic time. And these are the different learning competencies that you must be able to achieve by the end of this lesson. Right. So, geologic time scale. So, the geologic time scale is a formal subdivision of Earth time, and geologists represent the geologic time scale in the vertical manner, similar to the vertical succession of rock strata on Earth. So, this is coherent with the principle of superposition, which I have mentioned earlier in our previous lesson, which states that new layers are laid down on top of pre-existing rock strata. So like the present representation of time as months, weeks, and days, the geologic time is represented into smaller units based on several significant events that have happened throughout Earth's history. So the current system used to divide the geologic time is based on time spans, and that includes age, which is the largest division. So this is measured in terms of millions of years. We also have epoch, which is tens of millions of years. Then it's followed by period, that's 100 million years, and then we have era, which is several hundred million years. And then finally, we have eon, which is half a billion years or more. So the image here that you see is a visual representation of the geologic time, and the early eons, which are Hadean, Archean, and Proterozoic. These are commonly preferred or referred to as the Precambrian because they precede the Cambrian period, which is the Paleozoic. So these are the different eon, era, and period. So basically, all you have to remember is that if we'll give it an analogy, diba? Every year would have months, every month would have weeks, and every weeks would have days. So it's the same with the geologic time. So every age would have eons, every eons would have its corresponding era, and every era would have its own period. So that's how you should look at it. Next, so first, we have the Precambrian. So Precambrian would have three eons. So we have the Hadean, Archean, and Proterozoic. So the first eon, so we have the Hadean. So if you look into the geologic time, the Precambrian actually encompasses approximately the first 4.1 billion years of the geologic time scale. And the Hadean was considered as the chaotic eon as it stretched from 4.6 GA to 3.8 GA, and it lasted for around 800 million years. So the Hadean came from the word Hades, meaning hell. And this period coincides with the event called the Late Heavy Bombardment, or the LHB, wherein the Earth's surface was continuously bombarded by meteorites, so as shown in this picture. Um, the extremely hot mantle also caused severe volcanism due to the eruption of molten rocks onto the Earth's surface. And also during the Hadean Eon, the oceans and atmosphere were formed, and the Earth's core and crust were stabilized. Next, we have the Archean Eon. So the Archean Eon stretched from about 1.3 billion years, and it was defined by the older rocks and the oldest fossils containing apex chert and stromatolites. During the Archean, the Earth was probably warm, and the atmosphere contained mostly methane and had little to no oxygen. So most of the Earth was covered with ocean, and in this eon, continent formation began. So that's the important events that happened during the Archean eon. Next, we have the Proterozoic eon. So the Proterozoic eon lasted for around 1.9 billion years, and it was considered the longest eon, so almost half of the age of Earth. It was the time of great changes, oxygenation of the atmosphere, origin and diversification of eukaryotic life, and appearance of multicellular animals life. So more diverse forms of fossils such as shell-bearing organisms have been found in sedimentary rocks. Alright, so next we have the Phanerozoic Eon. So the Phanerozoic Eon consists of three eras which include the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic. So each era is characterized by different or significant events. So during the early Phanerozoic or during the early Paleozoic era, many fossils were found in layers of sedimentary rocks. And it was the time that life greatly diversified. So marine life, marine invertebrate probably lived near the shores of shallow water. And fossils of trilobites and brachiopods were found preserved in rocks. So the pictures you see here are the trilobites and the brachiopods. So during the middle Paleozoic era, marine life forms had developed shells. So these shells formed beds of limestone and coral reefs. The final or the first animal to succeed in adapting itself to breathe air was said to be an amphibian that came out of the sea during the Devonian period. And land plants also began to develop during this period. Moreover, giant ferns and marsh plants provided food to land animals, which increased in number. So, marine life also developed, which means clams and snails increased in number, and species of fish became more abundant and showed a greater variety in form. Next, we have the late Paleozoic era. So it showed the appearance of reptiles. So at first, these animals looked much like their amphibian ancestors, but had the great advantage of being able to lay their eggs on dry land. Toward the end of Paleozoic era, the terrestrial climate changed, and many kinds of plants, such as land ferns, grew during this era. And scientists believe that the remains of these plants formed the huge coal deposits in many parts of the world. Next, we have the early Mesozoic. So during the early Mesozoic era, the formation of several continents began. North America began to part from Europe, and probably South America and Africa began to drift apart. And by the end of the era, Australia, New Zealand, and India had all left Africa, although Arabia still remained attached. With the formation of continents, new bodies of water also formed, and great changes in plant and animal life occurred. Scientists have found footprints of eggs, of bones, and other fossils of reptiles which existed during the Mesozoic era. Next, we have the early Mesozoic. So the largest creatures that existed during the Mesozoic era were the dinosaurs. And dinosaurs were believed to be descendants of the primitive reptiles that had survived from the Paleozoic era. So however, a current theory suggests that they were the ancestors of birds. So some of the dinosaurs that lived through the Mesozoic era were carnivores with bodies adapted for eating other dinosaurs, and some were herbivores with digestive organs adapted for a vegetarian diet. So toward the end of the Mesozoic era, more continents broke up. So North America and South America, Australia, Africa, and India became separate plates. And the plates drifted north and south until they reached their current or their present positions. And gradually, dinosaurs and other life forms died. The only surviving reptiles today are turtles, snakes, lizards, crocodiles, and alligators. So during the Cenozoic era, mountains were uplifted and new life forms started to appear. The volcanic activity that widespreadly occurred formed immense flow of lava and basalt. Warm-blooded animals such as the marsupials and primitive mammals roamed the land, and fossils that were uncovered to have belonged to this era indicated the existence of mammals with tooth structures for specific diets, limb structures for various postures, and increased brain size. So alongside the mammalian development, the modern horse, the modern birds, and deciduous trees also developed. And toward the end of this era, glaciers covered the northern hemisphere, hence the term Ice Age. The Ice Age is believed to have lasted for about 2 million years, and some of the earliest records of humans were discovered in stone tools.